we heard from Pari about artificial intelligence, and we heard from Frank about the speed, at which the business is changing, and how it's all evolving. And this is an opportunity for us to kind of interact with the two most thought leaders that we could find in the industry today. They live and he's my boss. So I really tell good things about him. So anyway. So what we will do is we'll talk a little bit about the software-defined everything, right? I mean, it's the digital investments are driving the software-defined business. There is a lot of potential benefits that the industry is already leveraging, right? Whether it is the automation, whether it is, oops. Can you hear me okay? No. How about now? Okay, great. Do I need to start off with the introduction again? Are we done with it?
No,
okay, sorry.
Keep moving.
So we'll kick off. So what I was saying is as the digital investments are driving the software, defined businesses and operations. I mean, we are already leveraging a lot of benefits through that, right? Whether it is related to automation, whether it is decreasing the cost, or whether it is the faster implementation cycles, or even efficient use of infrastructure, right? So there is a lot of benefits that we are already seeing today. So rather than actually optimizing some of these individual elements, what we are seeing is the set of resources. That's what the industry is terming as the software-defined everything. I mean, we had software-defined computing, we had software-defined networking, and now instead of claiming each and every small pieces of it as software-defined, now they have come up with software-defined everything. So that's how the industry is evolving. So we have two amazing panelists here. Anand Deshpande, who's the CEO of Persistent Systems, and Pari Natarajan, who's the CEO of Zinnov. We will be talking through, what's happening in the real world out there. So, Anand, let's start off with real understanding. For the companies, what does software-defined everything means?
See, okay, so good morning, all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. When you look at software-defined everything, the idea is that businesses are starting to evolve and starting to become very flexible and agile. Speed is one of the big things that Frank mentioned already. And if you want to operate at speed, you need the ability to redefine and retool your business, your components of your business, your things that you're working on, and everything else that you have. If you have rigid components that cannot be changed as the business evolves, then you are stuck with things that are old, right? So that's really what software-defined everything is. And if you look at, and all of you here are already familiar with what Tesla is doing with automobiles, but not only do people want to do that with automobiles, you want to do it with washing machines and dishwashers. So why should my dishwasher be the same once I buy it? Can it not evolve as you look at it over the next 15, 20 years? And that's about things. And then you have businesses which are all completely determined by the business model. How do I want to charge my customer? And everything is completely flexible where you want to change all of these kinds of things as you go along. And if you want to have the infrastructure to do this, you need to design it in a way so that it's based on software and you can redefine it as you go along. So that's really how this thing makes a lot of sense.
So Pari, on that note, what are some of the examples you have seen in the industry today?
I think the recent example is what Tesla did with their parking, the supercharge station, right? This is in the Palo Alto. What they found was it's so difficult to find parking in Palo Alto. So everybody's just parking the Tesla there, going for a dinner and coming back. And the supercharge station was already always full. So somebody came on Twitter and sent an email to Elon Musk, hey, your supercharger station's always full. In 2 days, they start a mechanism to charge for people who are parking the car more than 15 minutes at the supercharger station, right? In 2 days. What does a traditional company do? You want to build new revenue stream. You have a team, corporate strategy team, work on a PowerPoint. They hire people like us to do a business case. Go back, you do a value prop, ROI, and you start something. 8 months is already gone, right? And Tesla did it in 2 days. That's, for us, is software defined. You're defining how you make money almost in real time.
Right. So that's Tesla is still considered as a technology company, more or less, right? But what are some of the traditional industries doing, whether it is retail, whether it is banking, or whether it is like manufacturing? What are some of the examples that we have seen there? Anand?
Yeah, so we see this in hospitals right now and medical centers. People are trying to redefine how they want to charge for services. How do you want to pay people like doctors and others in terms of, you want to redefine your business models in terms of looking at what exactly is happening and where the money is. And the entire flow of collection from the customer all the way to the distribution of that money, that entire ecosystem is up for redefinition and readjustment. And you see that with many startups as well who are trying to disrupt a process at a time. But when you are a traditional business, you really want to make sure you have the ability to do that. And one of the things that we heard a lot from so we work with a very large insurance company, and they have a lot of data about healthcare data. And one of the things that the CIO mentioned is that, you see all these startups, they are talking about very fancy models, but they really don't have the data. We are the company who has pretty much all the data about real patients, real people, but we are not leveraging it to the extent that these companies are. So all of these kinds of people who have traditional data, and many of the traditional companies have a lot of data with them, and they're trying to figure out how to monetize that. And the ability to monetize it is really what makes this exciting.
So is it like a first world optimization currently, or is it something that is extending beyond the developed markets?
Though I think Pari and I have been part of this India stack and what's going on in India with respect to this whole digital India business. And there is a lot of change if you look at India from where I'm sitting right now in terms of how payment industry is changed in India right now. So we have an app which is Bhim, BHIM, which you can download. You don't need to have any credit card. You can do transactions between two individuals directly just because they have an Aadhaar identification. So, it's then the whole stack that's being built out. This is going to disrupt the payment industry. I don't have to pay a premium to Visa or to MasterCard to move money from one account to the other. And that just changes the game and makes it possible to get my payment to go into any transaction, even without people who have credit cards or any other bank account. Well, you have to have a bank account, but that's the only requirement. And I see that proliferation of payments as a big part of where some of these changes are happening. Again, going back to this, right? So I want to decide how much to charge, when to charge, and how do I get charging to happen everywhere, right? So that's really what we see a lot of action in.
Anything else, Pari?
So I'll give you another example from the automotive industry, right? So we are in this discussion with one of our customers who are a tier 1 supplier. And so your tier 1 supplier sells to the OEM, and OEM puts it in the car. So tier 1 doesn't really have a connection to the customers. But if you look at the industry, the value chain, the people who make money, the profit is getting aggregated with people who are connected to the customer. So what this company is going to the OEM could be a Mercedes, a BMW, and say, hey, I will give you a discount on your product, but if you allow me to ping the driver to tell them that my brake pad is getting on, come to my service center to change the brake pad, right? Because software they're able to get a connect to the customer, it allows them to directly go to the customer instead of the intermediary, which is in this case, an OEM.
Right.
So that's a big shift. So everybody in the value chain, which is because of software, they'll be able to directly connect to the customer. So how will that value chain change? Who will compete with who? That's another big thing which is going to change, at least in automotive.
Are we seeing any competition, like co-opetition coming up, or increasing a lot because of the software-defined everything?
Yeah, I think everybody's competing with everybody. Everybody wants to cooperate with everybody.
Unfortunately, that's the reality today. Anand, I will open up for the questions, but before that, I want to ask you a question. You are a very fast-growing company that works with multiple of, technology as well as the traditional industries. What impact does your company going through from the talent and capabilities perspective because of all these rapid changes?
No, I think it's a very significant change. See, a few things that we see in the market from our point of view. One is that the effort required for the same work is actually shrinking. So which means that the same work which took a lot of people to do now in the past, now you can do it with fewer and fewer people. So that has significant impact on our business model, which has traditionally been based on charging for people on the project. And now that is an issue with respect to the business model changes. Now, it also has, if you really look at it, if teams are becoming smaller and smaller, you expect all people on the team to do many more things rather than just a few things. That was the case in the past. So it requires everyone on the team to be far more aware of all the kinds of components that are there. They need to understand the technology components very well so that they can be contributing across the board. In the past, you would have had a team that was only doing testing or somebody just did reports. Those days are gone. Pretty much everyone is involved in every part of the business. Teams are smaller, they are more agile, they are more nimble. One good thing though that has happened is that it is relatively easy to figure things out, meaning it's not that difficult to figure some of these things out. The APIs or the access to these technologies are fairly easy. So it's a lot of training required, but again, it's possible to do it. But yes, it is causing a rapid shift in our business model and also in the activities that we are doing across the world right now. Also, globalization is another thing. So for example, for us right now, in the last 12 months, we have actually become far more global than we have ever been. So now we are in 10 countries, 17 locations. All of that stuff is all last 2 years.
Right, right.
So yeah, I mean, we are in a rapidly changing industry at the moment.
So in your organization, if you look at it, which roles had the biggest impact because of these trends?
Which roles, meaning?
Yeah.
So okay, the managers are the ones who are the most affected, meaning they don't have jobs left. Programmers will do fine, and one of the challenges that we run into in these kinds of situations is that there's a conflict, right? The people who really know how to do the work are the ones at the bottom of the pyramid, the young guys, the junior people. The people who control who gets on the projects are the guys sitting on the top who want to protect their friends and their jobs. So you have people who know what to do, but people who customers want, you want the experienced people, but the experienced people are not the right people to do the work. So there is a very interesting conflict that we'll have to deal with as we go along.
Right.
So it's very interesting at this time, and it makes my job much harder than it was ever before.
Right, I can imagine that. Pari, I mean, if the same question, I mean, when you're working with other, industries, not only the people who are in the technology side, but the people who are on the business side, how are they dealing with this impact? I mean, what skills are they?
Technology, meaning?
People who are not necessarily developing or implementing that, but people who are actually leveraging it for the business, right? How are they actually able to, upskill themselves? As this happens.
So I'll just give an example of, maybe one part is the product management organization. Right?
Sure.
And one of the things about product management is very hard to build, and you need to have domain expertise in a particular product. You need to understand customers, you need to talk to sales and all of that. What we see is with data and software, product management as a function will disappear for existing products. If you have an existing product, you need to update it and you have to optimize it. Mm-hmm. You have customer behavior coming in. So you know exactly what you need to build. So a data scientist and a software engineer is going to do a job of a product manager. So in a traditional product manager is required only when you're building completely new product, you're trying to get to a product market fit. And there, partly it's art and science. So your product manager role is completely shifting into one which is going to build for new products. The other one, which is for optimizing existing products, is becoming data scientist and software. Right? So each of this is a big impact.
That's huge impact. I mean, that is something that industry hasn't seen before, right? I mean, the roles used to evolve in certain manner, but now the disruption is kind of either completely taking away certain roles or impacting it so much that they have to upskill.
Yeah, think of Facebook. Facebook doesn't have. Think of Uber.
Right.
Uber doesn't have an engineering team in China or India. They don't have product management team in any of these countries, but they're able to launch features which are localized.
Exactly.
In matter of days.
Yeah.
By understanding what trends are coming from that market.
So with that thought, let's do one thing. I mean, I know that there are a lot of questions. This is a topic that has been of such a great importance or interest for everyone. So we'll open up for some questions. Anyone has questions? Yes, please.
So are there any industries from OEM or hardware perspective that are slowest to adopt the AI curve or has the most opportunity today?
Slowest to adopt?
Slowest, yeah.
Yeah.
Or just let's say who have the most opportunity today?
I think the most opportunity is in industries like healthcare, where there are a lot of unstructured data, and you can do a lot of things with predictive analytics. You can reduce the cost dramatically. You can do that in consumer software, enterprise software. Those are industries where we see retail. And industry which are more laggards are energy industry. And they've been laggards for a while. And now we're starting to see that change. We met with a CIO of one of the largest energy company, and they said, now AI is a big thing because they have to optimize on cost, and they're going to make sure whatever money they have is effectively spent. So they are building AI capabilities internally. Another one is aerospace industry. That again is a laggard, but we are starting to see them with drones and other technology coming in, starting to bring in AI.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ashish Kumar. I'm from Innovate. My question is to Amit in particular.
To Anand.
To Anand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in India a couple of months back, few months, and there I see a major disruption happening. So while in India we are sitting in the land of PayPal and others, PayPal, Visa, Mastercard. But in India, I'm sure you've heard Paytm and MobiKwik and all those payment services. So when do you think those disruptors who are disrupting the payment industry in India are going to hit the mainstream in the US and the global market too? I mean, any point of view on that?
No, I'm not really sure if that's such a transferable business in some sense, because there's a lot of regulation and a whole bunch of areas around that. The mobile wallets in India will get disrupted even in India right now. I'm very upbeat on what UPI and everything else that is happening around the UPI and payment infrastructure that is quite different from the mobile wallets and people like Paytm and MobiKwik. But again, for that kind of a UPI-like infrastructure to happen, the government, the industry, the infrastructure that we have with respect to Aadhaar, and the lack of incumbents who can influence, basically dissuade this kind of stuff to happen, just make it very difficult to do this in the US. So I don't think you can take UPI or the algorithms or the stuff that's coming out in India and just transplant it here in the US. It'll take a while. I don't believe it'll happen that fast.
And I'll give you an example in China. If you look at WeChat and look at the interface, I don't know how many of you played out with WeChat. It's so complex, and it goes into layers in terms of how the app is structured. You can do transaction, you can buy stuff, you can talk to people. Versus the US, you want very clean interfaces, and you are disaggregating the apps into multiple apps. So even Facebook has Facebook Messenger, which is different from Facebook, right? So your paradigm, your consumer experience is very, very different in Asia compared to the US. So it's going to be harder for some of those companies to be successful here.
Any other question? Yes.
Question for Anand. Anand, you made the statement that the effort required for the same work is shrinking. So how are you adapting your business models to make money?
Right. So, one of the things that we are. Yes. So the question was that, I mentioned that the effort required for the same work is going down. So how does it affect our business model? Because a lot of our business model traditionally has been on the basis of effort-based billing, right? So that's the question that he asked. So clearly it is affecting our business, and we are changing our business model. So in the last 2 to 3 years, we have moved from just being based on effort to being based on value and IP and results. So almost 30% of our business today comes from outcome, where we are not dependent on the people we have on the project, but it's dependent on the revenues that our customers generate on their projects. So there are many new models that are going to happen in the next couple of years. I think we are still in the discovery phase. We are quite open and being very innovative in terms of business model changes. But clearly the goal in everything that we are selling right now is to see how to dissociate ourselves, where the efficiencies that we get and the innovation that we do doesn't hurt our business in the long term. Because if we are only dependent on effort, then you want to reduce effort, and that's going to reduce your business.
Anand, one separate question. The speed at which the entire software-enabled infrastructure or the ecosystem is evolving is so fast, right?
Yes.
How is the regulatory aspect of it catching up? Is it something? Are you seeing a lot of pushback either from the regulators or the governments themselves?
Well, I think it's very industry specific, meaning if you are looking at financial or healthcare, there are certain regulatory aspects, and people are evolving, and some of these new things are coming up.
Okay.
But in many other cases where it's just consumer data or many of the other things like that, I think regulations are still quite lax, and data is available through APIs, and you can pretty much get to it. So there's monetization issues. But I think when you look at the financial industry and what you can do with the financial data or what you can do with healthcare data, clearly regulations are there, and I think you have to know what you're doing to get access to that kind of data.
Pari, any comments?
Yeah, I think it's creating a social challenge more than a regulation challenge.
Okay.
If you look at Uber has 250,000 drivers in India. 250,000 drivers in 3 years.
Yep.
And some of the largest companies in India, like TCS, Infosys, they have about 200,000
Yep.
engineers. They built over the last 30 years, right? And now an Uber model here is like, okay, based on the amount of time they drive, the salary could go from $5,000 to $3,000, and it seemed like it's okay here. But in India, if somebody's salary is reduced like to 50%, and a lot of them didn't have a car before. So they went and they borrowed money and they bought a car, and it's reducing, and this creating this massive social unrest.
Yeah.
And because of a company which is based in the Bay Area, building and creating that business in India, and the government doesn't know what to do with it. How do you react? Do you put a regulation?
Yeah.
What regulation would you put in? The company is somewhere else, right?
Sure.
It's creating some very fascinating issues, which I don't think anybody have figured out the answers. And we're going to have more such issues going forward.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. I think we have time for one more question, but I want to see if there is any question in the audience. Otherwise, I'll wrap up with one final question. Okay. Anand, a question for you is, as we see this, the infrastructure, the software-defined everything evolving so fast, do you see a convergence of platforms, or are you already seeing a convergence of these platforms? Will there be like a case where there will be only like 2 or 3 dominant software-defined everything platforms, and you basically create applications on top of it?
No, I don't quite see it that way yet. I think what is happening is that, okay, let's go. This platform is always a very dangerous term. You never know what platform you're referring to.
Sure.
But if you look at when you look at things going into the cloud, yes, there'll be a small number of platforms or cloud providers who might provide the cloud. But while that is the case, there is a definite change when you look at Internet of Things and the business of everything. The cloud as we see it may not really be the cloud that holds most of the data, because people are looking at edge in a very different way, and people are trying to do very industry-specific clouds, which are very private. So, I think we are still very early in the game. Okay, so I don't believe the standardization of platform is going to happen really fast.
Okay.
I think people are going to evolve and build out things as you go along. The biggest place where standardization or some level of integration that is required is around the API layer. And even there, you don't want to necessarily standardize. The internet has done a really good job where different companies, independent of each other, are able to exchange data because of the resilience of the API architecture. Okay. So I expect something like that to happen first. People will figure these things out as you go along. You want to keep building, and it's moving so fast that you cannot just create a standards body to say, okay, we are going to standardize everything, or here's this one platform that's going to happen. As the market evolves by industry segments or by product segments, I think you will see sort of a gravitation towards certain platforms, which might then define the standard. But I don't think there is one size fits all for the next few years, for sure.
Got it. So with that, we will wrap up the panel. A big round of applause for the panelists for sharing such a great insights with us.
Thank you.